The moment I walked through my own front door and saw 5 people sitting in my living room like they owned the place, that's the moment everything I'd been quietly tolerating for 3 years finally crystallized into something I could no longer ignore. 5 people. My husband Marcus's relatives, his Aunt Donna, 2 of his cousins, Jalen and Brittany's boyfriend, whose name I could never remember, plus Marcus's younger brother Deshaun, who I'm pretty sure hadn't held a steady job since 2019. All of them spread out across my furniture, shoes on, TV remote in hand, the smell of someone's fast food bag already crumpled on my coffee table. My coffee table. The one I'd refinished myself over a long weekend last spring, sanding it down and repainting it a matte sage green that took me 3 hardware store trips to get exactly right. I stood in the doorway for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then I smiled. The kind of smile you paste on when every other option feels dangerous. Said a quick, "Hey everyone," and walked straight to my bedroom. Shut the door, sat on the edge of my bed with my purse still on my shoulder and my work badge still clipped to my blazer, and I just breathed. Because I had already eaten. I'd grabbed a chicken sandwich and sweet potato fries from the place near my office, eaten in my car in the parking garage like I was hiding from something. And I guess, in hindsight, I was. I'd been hiding from this exact moment for longer than I wanted to admit. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with 5 hungry relatives in my living room. It starts about 3.5 years earlier, on a warm Saturday in October, when Marcus Carter smiled at me across a crowded housewarming party in Decatur, Georgia, and I thought, genuinely, stupidly thought, that I had finally gotten something right. I was 31 when I met Marcus, old enough to know what I wanted, young enough to still be romantic about it. I was working as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company in Atlanta. Not glamorous, but solid. I had my own apartment in a quiet complex off Glenwood Avenue, a reliable 2019 Honda Accord I'd paid off a year early, and a 401k I actually contributed to every month. I was doing okay. Better than okay, honestly. I'd spent most of my 20s building a foundation, the kind my mom never had. And by 31, I was standing on it. The housewarming was for my coworker Priya's new place, a cute townhouse she'd bought with her fiancé in a neighborhood that was still mostly affordable, but clearly on its way up. I didn't even want to go that night. I'd had a long week, my feet hurt, and I'd already changed out of my work clothes into sweats when Priya texted me a guilt trip emoji chain that went on for about 45 characters. I put on dark jeans and a rust-colored top, did a quick lip gloss refresh, and drove over. Marcus was there because he was friends with Priya's fiancé, Kevin, from college. He was standing near the kitchen island, laughing at something, and when he laughed, his whole face did this thing. Eyes scrunched, head tilted back slightly, completely unguarded. I noticed that before I noticed how tall he was, before I noticed the broad shoulders or the neatly trimmed beard. I noticed that he laughed like he meant it. We talked for 2 hours straight that night. He was an electrician, licensed, running his own small operation out of a van he'd had since 2017, steadily building a client base. He talked about his work with a kind of quiet pride I found immediately attractive. Not bragging, just solid. He knew his trade, he was good at it, and he was honest about where he was trying to go. He wanted to grow the business, maybe hire 1 or 2 guys, eventually buy a house. "I'm not in a rush," he told me, leaning against Priya's counter with a bottle of Heineken. "I just want to do things right. Build something that's actually mine." I remember thinking, this man speaks my language. We started dating in November. By February, he was leaving a toothbrush at my apartment. By July, we were talking about moving in together. I was cautious. I'd had one serious relationship in my late 20s that ended badly. A guy named Trevor, who turned out to be emotionally unavailable in ways that took me way too long to recognize. So I asked Marcus the kinds of questions I'd been too afraid to ask Trevor. How do you handle money? What does family mean to you? What does a hard week look like for you? And what do you need from a partner during it? Marcus answered every question thoughtfully. He had some credit card debt from a rough year in 2020. COVID had hit his business hard, but he was paying it down steadily. He had a good relationship with his mom, though she lived 2 hours away in Savannah, and they mostly talked on the phone. His family was close, he said. Big gatherings for holidays, people showing up for each other. That's important to me, he said one night when we were cooking dinner in my kitchen. Family showing up, not just in the good times. I thought that was beautiful. I come from a small, scattered family. My parents divorced when I was 9. My dad relocated to Phoenix, and we drifted. My mom worked double shifts my whole childhood, and we were close but exhausted together. The idea of a big, warm, showing-up family felt like something I'd always quietly wanted. I should have asked more questions about what showing up actually meant to him, specifically, with examples, with boundaries discussed in advance. We got engaged in March of the following year. He proposed at a restaurant we'd been to on our first official date, a small Italian place in Virginia Highland, and he'd coordinated with the owner to have them bring out a little dessert plate with the ring sitting on it. It was corny and perfect, and I cried in a way I hadn't expected to. We got married 6 months later, a small ceremony with about 60 people held at an outdoor venue in Stone Mountain on a Saturday afternoon in September when the Georgia heat had finally started to ease up. The first year of marriage felt like a reward. We bought a house in Smyrna, a 3-bedroom ranch with a decent backyard and an attached garage Marcus immediately claimed as workshop space. The mortgage was tight but manageable, split between 2 incomes. We had a system. I handled the bills, he handled maintenance and repairs. We split groceries and date nights and the occasional weekend trip. It worked. We worked. Then, somewhere around month 14, I started noticing things. Small things at first. Marcus mentioning that his cousin Jaylene was going through something and might need to crash with us for a week. His brother Deshaun calling at odd hours, always needing something, a ride, a loan, someone to talk to at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. His Aunt Donna, who I'd met twice at family gatherings and found perfectly nice in small doses, texting Marcus links to apartments with the message, "What do you think?" as if he were her personal real estate advisor. I told myself it was just family dynamics. Every family has them. Marcus had warned me his people were close. I'd said I thought that was beautiful, remember? So I smiled. I accommodated. I made the extra plate, gave up the guest room, left the room when the phone calls ran long. But the calls got longer. The visits got less announced. And on the Tuesday evening that started all of this, the evening I came home after a 10-hour workday, after a meeting that should have been an email, after sitting in Atlanta traffic for 45 minutes on I-285, I pushed open my front door and found 5 of them sitting in my living room, looking at me like I was the one who'd just shown up uninvited. I smiled. I said, "Hey." I walked to my bedroom and shut the door. And sitting there on the edge of my bed, purse on my shoulder, badge still clipped to my blazer, I realized something had quietly shifted inside me. The smile I'd given them, that automatic, self-protective smile, felt different this time. It didn't feel like patience. It felt like the last one I had. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Hey babe, forgot to mention family's stopping by tonight. Can you make something? There's ground beef in the freezer." I stared at that message for a long time. Outside my bedroom door, I could hear the TV. Someone laughed. I heard the refrigerator open and close. Someone helping themselves, just like that. I put my phone face down on the nightstand, and for the first time in 3.5 years, I didn't text back. I lay there on my bed for probably 20 minutes, just staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me. Outside my bedroom door, the television volume went up. Someone changed the channel. I heard what sounded like Deshaun doing that loud, honking laugh of his, the kind that fills every corner of a room whether you want it to or not. And then I heard the refrigerator open again, and this time it stayed open long enough that I could picture someone standing there, one hand on the door, just browsing my refrigerator like it was a convenience store. My phone buzzed a second time. I didn't pick it up. I changed out of my work clothes, slowly, deliberately, like I was doing it underwater, hung my blazer on the hook behind the door, unclipped my badge, and set it on the dresser next to my jewelry box, the small wooden one my mom had given me when I graduated college, painted yellow with a little brass latch. I pulled on a pair of joggers and an old Spellman sweatshirt I'd had since forever, and sat back down on the edge of the bed. And I thought about the ground beef sitting in my freezer. The ground beef that Marcus had mentioned casually in a text, as if it were a reasonable solution. As if "there's ground beef in the freezer" was a complete sentence. As if I was supposed to read that and think, right, okay, I'll just thaw that out and throw together a meal for 6 people, 5 of whom gave me 0 notice they were coming, after a 10-hour workday and 45 minutes of I-285 traffic. I picked up my phone, not to respond to Marcus. I opened my notes app and just started writing. I do that sometimes when I'm too wound up to think straight. I write things down so they stop bouncing around in my skull. I typed, 5 people, no warning, ground beef in the freezer, after 10 hours, after 285, after the Hendricks account meeting that lasted 2.5 hours and solved absolutely nothing. Then I just stared at what I'd written, and I felt something settle into place in my chest. Not calm exactly, more like clarity. I heard a knock at my bedroom door. "Ashley?" It was Aunt Donna's voice, soft, a little tentative, with that particular quality that manages to sound both apologetic and entitled at the same time. "Honey, we were just wondering about dinner." I took 1 breath. 2. Then I got up and opened the door. Aunt Donna was standing there in her church cardigan, powder blue, always the same powder blue cardigan, with her hands clasped in front of her and a look on her face that I can only describe as hopeful expectation, like she'd already decided the answer was yes and just needed me to confirm it. "Hey, Donna," I said. My voice came out perfectly level. I was almost proud of it. "How are you?" "Oh, I'm good, baby, I'm good," she smiled. "Long drive up from Savannah, you know. We left around 2, hit some traffic coming through Macon." She paused, and the pause had weight. "We're all pretty hungry." "I bet," I said. Another pause. She was waiting for me to fill it with something practical, a timeline, a menu, an apology for not having dinner already on the table. "I actually already ate," I told her. I grabbed something on the way home. The hopeful expression flickered. "Oh." She tilted her head slightly. "Well, Marcus said—" "Marcus isn't home yet," I said. Still level, still pleasant. I'm not sure when he's getting in, but when he does, I'm sure he'll figure something out for everyone. Donna looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she nodded slowly, said, "Okay, honey," and went back to the living room. I heard her murmur something to the others, and then the television volume went up again. I went back to my bed. I picked up my phone. This time, I read Marcus's text again, the whole thing, start to finish. "Hey, babe, forgot to mention, family's stopping by tonight. Can you make something? There's ground beef in the freezer." And I made myself sit with every single word of it. Forgot to mention. Not, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you." Not, "I know this is a lot to ask." Just forgot to mention, like it was a minor detail. Like families stopping by and 5 adults expecting dinner were equivalent to, "Oh, we're out of paper towels." I typed back, "I already ate. You'll need to handle dinner when you get home." I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I put the phone back down and stared at it, half expecting it to explode. Marcus got home at 7:14. I know because I heard the garage door go up and I looked at my phone automatically. I stayed in the bedroom. I listened to the sounds of reunion, the greetings, the laughter, Deshawn's voice getting louder, Brittany saying something that made everyone crack up, Marcus's laugh, warm and easy, rolling through the walls of my house like he hadn't just asked me to cook dinner for 5 people without any notice. It was another 20 minutes before he knocked on the bedroom door. "Hey." He came in, already loosening the collar of his work shirt, smelling like a long day, sawdust and something metallic, the particular smell of someone who works with their hands. Under other circumstances, I found it reassuring. Right now, it just made me more tired. "You good?" "I'm fine," I said. He sat down on his side of the bed, the way he always did when he got home, kicked off his boots, set them by the nightstand, rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry I didn't text you earlier about everyone coming. It kind of came together last minute." "How last minute?" He hesitated. "Donna called me around noon." I looked at him. "Noon. So you knew for 7 hours." "I was in the middle of a job, Ash. I meant to text you and then I got busy and—" "Marcus." I kept my voice quiet, controlled. 7 hours is not last minute. 7 hours is enough time to send one text. One text that says, "Hey, my family is coming for dinner tonight. Are you okay with that?" That's all it would have taken. He rubbed his neck again. "I know, you're right. I should have texted sooner." And here's the thing. He said it simply, without getting defensive. And for a second, I felt the familiar pull of it. The way he could acknowledge something directly, no drama, no ego, and suddenly the ground under my frustration would shift. He did that. He'd always been able to do that. It was one of the things I'd loved about him in the beginning. "They're going to want to eat," he said. "I was going to order some pizzas." "That's a great idea," I said. He looked at me, trying to gauge whether I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. Pizza was a perfectly reasonable solution that required nothing from me. He nodded, pulled out his phone, and I watched him open the Domino's app and start building an order. 5 adults, I thought. That's at least 3 large pizzas minimum, probably 4. $45, $50 easy. I didn't say anything. I just watched his thumbs move across the screen. "You want anything?" he asked. "I'll add something for you." "I'm good," I said. I ate. He placed the order. I caught a glimpse of the total, $62 with delivery and tip. And then he set his phone down and looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between apologetic and something else I couldn't name right away. "I know it's a lot, coming home to a house full of people," he said. "It is," I agreed. "They're family, though." "They're your family," I said, "and I love that you have them. But Marcus, I need you to understand something." I stopped, tried to find the exact right words. "I need some notice. That's not asking too much. That's just basic. It's just courtesy. To me, in my own house." "Our house," he said, and his voice had a new quality in it. Not sharp exactly, just corrective. "Our house," I said. "Yes, which is exactly why I need to be part of the decision when we're having guests." He nodded. "Okay, that's fair." And then, they're going through things, Ash. Donna's lease is up at the end of the month. She's looking for a new place. Deshawn's between jobs right now. Brittany and her boyfriend just got out of a situation in Macon. Everyone's dealing with stuff. I felt something cold move through me. Not because of what he'd said exactly, but because of the way he'd said it. The way it was all piled together in one soft, explanatory sentence, like he was reading from a list he'd been keeping. And the way he was looking at me, not apologetically, carefully. "What does Donna being between leases have to do with tonight?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for one beat too long. "Marcus?" "She mentioned maybe staying with us for a little while," he said, "just until she finds something." The room went very still. "How long is a little while?" I said. "I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month." I stared at him. He met my eyes, and in his I saw something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, not uncertainty, expectation. The same quiet, settled expectation that had been on Aunt Donna's face when she knocked on my bedroom door asking about dinner, like the answer was already decided, like I was the last stop on a train that had left the station without me. "And when were you going to tell me about this?" I said. "I was going to talk to you tonight," he said. "Before or after you texted me to cook for 5 people?" He didn't answer that. I stood up, walked to the window. Outside, the neighbor's porch light was on, and their dog was barking at something in the dark. Normal Tuesday night in Smyrna, Georgia. Completely normal. I pressed my fingertips against the cool glass, and I thought about the word our house, and what it actually meant when decisions about that house were being made without me, across a timeline that apparently started at noon and somehow still hadn't reached me by 7 p.m. I need to think, I said. Ashley, I'm not saying no, I said. I'm not saying anything right now. I'm saying I need to think, and I need you to give me that. He was quiet. Then, okay. He left to go join his family. I heard the living room noise swell briefly when the bedroom door opened, then settle back to its low hum when it closed again. I stood at the window for a long time, and then my phone buzzed. Not Marcus this time, a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Is this Ashley Carter? A woman's voice, professional, measured. It is, I said slowly. This is Linda Park. I'm a property manager over at the Creekside Commons complex on Atlanta Road. I have you down as an emergency contact for a Marcus Carter. He submitted a rental inquiry for a 2-bedroom unit on behalf of a Donna Reeves. I was just calling to confirm whether you'd be co-signing the application. Everything in me went completely quiet. I'm sorry, I said. He submitted that when? Let me check. A brief pause. Papers shuffling, or maybe a mouse click. Looks like about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. I stood at my bedroom window, holding my phone so tightly I could feel the case biting into my palm. The neighbor's dog had stopped barking. The street was quiet. Inside the house, I could hear someone, Deshaun probably, laughing at something on TV, and the sound of it felt surreal, like a track playing in the wrong movie. I'm sorry, I said to Linda Park, the property manager. I kept my voice even, professional, the same voice I use in meetings when someone says something that makes no sense, and I need another 10 seconds to process it. Can you say that again? 3 weeks ago? Yes, ma'am. She sounded slightly uncertain now, like she was starting to realize she'd stepped into something. The inquiry came in online, and then Mr. Carter followed up with a phone call. He listed you as the co-signer and provided your social security number and employment information. We just need your signature on the actual application before we can move forward. My social security number, my employment information. I sat down on the edge of the bed again, very slowly, like my knees had stopped working. Ms. Park, I said, I need to be very clear with you. I did not authorize anyone to submit my personal information for any rental application. Not 3 weeks ago, not ever. I need you to flag this inquiry immediately and not move forward with anything until you hear from me directly. A pause. Of course, she said, and her voice had shifted, crisper now, more careful. I'll make a note on the file. I'm sorry for any confusion, Mrs. Carter. Thank you, I said. I'll be following up. I hung up. I sat there in the dark of my bedroom. I hadn't turned on a light, I realized. The only illumination was the glow of my phone screen, and I let the full weight of what I'd just heard settle over me. Marcus had submitted a rental application on behalf of Aunt Donna. He had used my social security number, my employment information, 3 weeks ago, which meant that when he'd been sitting next to me on this same bed 2 weeks ago, telling me about a new job in Cobb County, asking if I wanted Thai or pizza for dinner, kissing me on the forehead when he left in the morning, he had already done this. He had already made a decision that involved my financial identity, my credit, my name on a legal document, and he hadn't said a single word about it. The ground beef in the freezer suddenly felt like the least of my problems. I opened my phone's browser and searched. Can someone use your SSN to co-sign without consent, Georgia? Then I stared at the results for a moment, closed the browser, and opened it again. I typed, identity theft, co-sign, rental application. Then, family law attorney, Atlanta, free consultation. I don't know how long I sat there doing that. Long enough for the pizza to arrive. I heard the doorbell, heard the surge of noise from the living room, heard someone say, finally, in a voice that suggested they'd been waiting a very long time. Long enough for the smell of it to drift under my bedroom door, cheese and warm dough, completely ordinary. Long enough for Marcus to knock twice, softly, and say, Ash, pizza's here if you want some, and for me to say, I'm good, without opening the door, without looking up from my phone. He didn't push. He went back to his family. I lay down on my side, fully clothed, phone on the pillow next to me like a second person. And I waited for something, some surge of anger, some righteous clarity. But what came instead was something I hadn't expected. A kind of grief. Not sharp, not hot, just a slow gray seeping, the feeling of watching something you loved go very slowly dark. I had loved this man. I had chosen him carefully, with my whole adult self, all the hard-earned wariness of my 30s. I had asked the right questions. I had paid attention. I had believed that the thing I saw in him, the steadiness, the quiet pride, the way he laughed with his whole face, was real. And maybe it was. Maybe it still was, somewhere underneath all of this. But somewhere between month 14 and tonight, something had shifted in the architecture of our marriage, so gradually I'd missed it, and now I was lying in the dark of my own bedroom while 5 of his relatives ate pizza in my living room, and my name and social security number were sitting on a rental application I had never agreed to sign. I didn't sleep well. I woke up twice, once at 2 a.m. when I heard movement in the hallway, the bathroom door, someone shuffling back to the guest room where Aunt Donna was apparently already installed, and once at 4:17, just before the sky started to go gray, for no reason at all except that my body had decided sleep was finished. Marcus was beside me, breathing deep and slow, arm thrown over his face the way he always slept, and I lay there looking at the ceiling and thinking about the word co-signer and what it actually meant. It meant liability. It meant if Donna Reeves didn't pay her rent, the call came to me. It meant my credit score, the credit score I had spent my entire adult life building with disciplined, boring, unglamorous care, could take a hit because of a lease I'd never agreed to in a conversation I'd never had. I got up at 5:30, made coffee, stood in my own kitchen in the gray pre-dawn quiet, and drank it standing at the counter because I didn't want to sit at the table where someone had left a crumpled Domino's box and a stack of paper plates. The house felt different in this light, smaller, like the walls had moved in slightly while I slept. I went to work. I didn't wake Marcus. I didn't leave a note. I just got dressed, grabbed my badge and my purse, and left. The next 4 days were the worst of it. That's what I'd call the bottom. Not one dramatic moment, but 4 days of ordinary life that had become completely unrecognizable. Aunt Donna stayed. She was still there when I got home Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday. She had moved her things into the guest room, a large floral suitcase I could see through the open door, a toiletry bag on the guest bathroom counter, a cardigan draped over the chair in the corner. She was pleasant. She made herself coffee in the mornings. She watched her shows. She was completely, utterly at home. Deshawn left on Thursday. Jaylan and Brittany and the boyfriend had gone Tuesday morning. But Donna stayed, and every evening I came home to her presence in my house, in my space, the space I had carefully made mine over 2 years of weekends and hardware store trips and small, deliberate choices. And every evening I smiled and said hello and went to my bedroom and shut the door. And the smile got a little more like a wall and a little less like anything human. Marcus and I had 3 conversations during those 4 days. 3. All of them surface level. How was your day? Did you call the plumber about the guest bath faucet? There's leftover chicken in the fridge. We were circling the real conversation like it was a downed power line neither of us wanted to touch. I hadn't told him about Linda Park's call. I hadn't told him what I knew. I was waiting. For what, I wasn't entirely sure. Maybe for him to bring it up himself. Maybe for some signal that he understood what he'd done. Maybe I was just trying to buy time while something inside me figured out what came next. Friday evening I came home, and for the first time all week, Donna wasn't in the living room. I could hear the shower running in the guest bath. The house was almost quiet. I set my bag down on the kitchen table, and I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, and I started crying. Not sobbing, just tears, steady and quiet, running down my face while I stood completely still. I wasn't even sure what I was crying for. The marriage, the trust, the ground beef text, the rental application, The fact that I'd eaten a chicken sandwich alone in a parking garage because some part of me had already known I didn't want to come home. All of it, maybe. The whole accumulated weight of it. That was the bottom. Standing in my kitchen, crying silently so Donna wouldn't hear me through the guest bathroom wall. My phone buzzed. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. A text from a number I'd saved 3 years ago and almost never used. "Hey girl, I know it's been a minute. You okay? I saw Marcus's cousin posted something on Instagram and I just had a feeling. Priya." I stared at her name on my screen for a long moment. Priya, whose housewarming party I hadn't wanted to attend. Priya, who had guilt-tripped me with 45 emoji characters and accidentally changed the entire direction of my life. I hadn't spoken to her properly in months. We'd drifted the way work friendships sometimes do after someone leaves a company, which she had, moving to a new position in Buckhead about a year and a half ago. I typed back, "Can you talk?" Her response was immediate, "Calling you now." She picked up before I'd even moved to the bedroom. "Ashley, talk to me." And I did. Standing in my kitchen, voice low, I told her everything. The 5 relatives, the ground beef text, Donna in the guest room, and then the part I hadn't said out loud to anyone, Linda Park and the rental application and my social security number, and 3 weeks ago. Priya was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, carefully, "Ashley, do you know what co-signing a lease means for your credit?" "Yes," I said. "I know exactly what it means." "And he did this without telling you?" "Without telling me." Another pause. "Okay," she said, and her voice shifted into something I recognized. She used to use it in project meetings when everything was on fire and someone needed to be the calm one. "I'm going to give you a name. Her name is Renee Okafor. She's a family law attorney in Midtown. She handled my cousin's situation last year. She does free 30-minute consultations on Saturdays. You don't have to decide anything. You just need to understand where you stand." I leaned against the kitchen counter. Outside, the sun was going down over the neighbor's roof, painting the kitchen window a pale orange. "You think it's that serious?" I said. It wasn't really a question. "I think," Priya said slowly, "that a man who uses his wife's social security number to help someone else without her knowledge and then invites that person to move into their shared home is a man who has made a decision about who matters in his household. And I think you deserve to know what your options are before he makes any more of those decisions for you." I said nothing. I was looking at the Domino's box still sitting on my counter, the one I hadn't thrown away, because some part of me couldn't bear to do one more thing that felt like cleaning up after someone else. "Will you call her?" Priya asked. "Yes," I said. And I meant it. Not the way I'd meant things in the past few days, the performed yeses, the managed smiles. I meant it the way I used to mean things, back when I was 31 and standing on a foundation I'd built myself. "Good," Priya said. "I'm texting you her number right now. And Ashley?" A brief pause. "Save every document you have access to. Bank statements, mortgage records, anything with both your names on it. Just save them somewhere he can't see." I looked toward the hallway. The shower had stopped. I could hear Donna moving around in the guest room, the soft thud of a suitcase being opened. "I will," I said quietly. "Thank you, Priya." We hung up. I stood there another moment. Then I walked to the counter, picked up the Domino's box, and dropped it in the recycling bin. A small thing, but mine. I went to my bedroom, opened my laptop, and started pulling up documents. The mortgage, the joint bank account statements going back 6 months, the insurance policies. I made a folder on my desktop. I named it Home Maintenance, something boring, something that would read as nothing if someone glanced at the screen. And I started moving copies in, methodically, quietly. And when Marcus's key turned in the garage door at 6:52 p.m., I closed the laptop, set it aside, and picked up the book on my nightstand like I'd been reading for hours. My heart was completely steady. That surprised me. I had expected fear or guilt or the familiar pull of wanting to smooth things over. Instead, there was just that clarity again, the same thing I'd felt 4 days ago sitting on this bed with my work badge still clipped to my blazer, only sharper now, more deliberate. He knocked. "Hey, you hungry? I was thinking I'd make pasta tonight." "Sure," I said pleasantly. "That sounds good." I heard him move toward the kitchen. I heard him greet Donna, heard her laugh at something he said. I heard the sound of a pot being filled at the sink, the click of the gas burner catching. I opened my phone and saved Renee Okafor's number under a contact name I'd used in college for a professor whose calls I didn't always want to answer, Dr. R. Williams. Then I opened my laptop again and kept going. The Saturday morning consultation with Renee Okafor happened 8 days after Linda Park's phone call. I drove to Midtown alone, told Marcus I had errands, and parked in a deck off Peachtree Street with 20 minutes to spare. I sat in my car and looked at my phone. The folder I'd named Home Maintenance now had 43 documents in it. Mortgage agreement, joint account statements, the insurance policies, screenshots of every text Marcus had sent me about his family coming over, going back 14 months. And one more thing, a screenshot I'd taken of the Creekside Commons website showing that a 2-bedroom unit on Atlanta Road was listed at $1,450 a month, which meant that if Donna Reeves defaulted, that liability would land on my credit report alongside my name. Renee Okafor was not what I expected. I think I'd pictured someone severe, sharp suit, cold office, the kind of person who treats human suffering as a spreadsheet problem. Instead, she was a small woman in her late 40s with natural hair pulled back and reading glasses pushed up on her head, sitting in an office that had actual plants in it, living ones, the kind that required tending. She shook my hand, pointed me to a chair, and said, "Tell me what's going on. Don't edit yourself. I need the full picture." So I told her, all of it. The 5 relatives, the ground beef text, Donna in the guest room. Then the part that mattered most. Linda Park, the rental application, my social security number, my employment information, 3 weeks ago. Renee listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "Has your husband ever had access to documents containing your social security number?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "We filed joint taxes. The mortgage. He would have seen it." "And you never gave verbal or written consent to be listed as a co-signer on any rental application for Donna Reeves?" "Never." She nodded slowly. "Ashley, what your husband did constitutes unauthorized use of your personal identifying information. In Georgia, depending on intent, that can rise to the level of identity fraud. At minimum, it's a serious breach of fiduciary duty within the marriage." She paused. "I want to be honest with you, because that's the only useful thing I can be in 30 minutes. You have 2 distinct issues here. One is the rental application. That's actionable and needs to be addressed immediately, regardless of what you decide about the marriage. The other is what you want your marriage to look like going forward, and that's a decision only you can make. But those 2 things need to be separated in your mind right now, because conflating them will slow you down." I looked at her. "What do I do about the application?" "You've already done the right thing by contacting the property manager and instructing her to flag the file. I'd follow that up in writing, email, today, so you have a timestamp. I'll give you language for it before you leave." She picked up a pen. "Beyond that, I'd recommend placing a fraud alert on your credit with all 3 bureaus. It's free, it takes about 15 minutes, and it means no new credit can be extended in your name without additional verification. Do it today." "Okay," I said. "And then you need to have a conversation with your husband. Not a fight, a conversation with specific questions, and you need to watch very carefully how he answers them." I drove home with 3 pages of handwritten notes and a document Renee had typed up in her printer while we talked, a template for the email to Creekside Commons with her firm's name at the bottom as a reference point. I sent it from my car before I started the engine. Then I opened 3 browser tabs, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and placed the fraud alerts one by one, sitting in the parking deck with the engine off and the concrete silence around me. Then I drove home. Marcus was in the garage when I pulled in, working on something, the sound of a drill going. Donna was in the kitchen when I walked through the door, standing at my stove making what smelled like scrambled eggs, wearing the powder blue cardigan, completely at home. She smiled at me. "Morning, honey. Want some eggs?" "No, thank you," I said. My voice was pleasant, steady. I set my purse on the counter, turned toward the garage door, and said, "Marcus, can you come inside for a minute?" The drill stopped. A pause. Then, "Yeah, give me a sec." I looked at Donna. "Donna, would you mind giving us a few minutes? Maybe take your breakfast to the living room?" Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of something that wasn't quite surprise but was close. "Of course," she said. She took her plate and her mug and moved out of the kitchen with a kind of careful quiet that told me she understood this was not about the eggs. Marcus came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a shop rag, and stopped when he saw my face. Not my expression, I'd kept that neutral. He just stopped, the way animals stop when something in the air changes. "What's up?" "Sit down," I said. He sat at the kitchen table. I sat across from him. I'd decided on the drive home that I wasn't going to lead with anger. Anger was a door he knew how to manage. I was going to lead with facts. "I got a phone call last week," I said, "from a woman named Linda Park. She's a property manager at Creekside Commons on Atlanta Road." I watched his face. A muscle in his jaw moved. "She called to confirm that I'd be co-signing a rental application for Donna Reeves, an application you submitted 3 weeks ago, using my Social Security number and my employment information." The kitchen was very quiet. From the living room, I could hear the faint sound of Donna's television. "Ashley," he started. "I need you to not explain it yet," I said. "I need you to just tell me one thing first. Did you submit that application?" He looked at the table, then at me. "Yes." "Did you use my Social Security number without asking me?" A pause, longer than it should have been. "I was going to talk to you about it." "That's not what I asked you." "Yes," he said, quietly. "I did." I let that sit for a moment. "Marcus, do you understand what co-signing a lease means? If Donna doesn't pay, that's my credit, my name, the credit score I've been building since I was 22 years old. Donna's not going to default. That is not the point." My voice stayed level, but something in it shifted, and he heard it because he stopped. "The point is that you made a legal and financial decision involving my identity without my knowledge or consent 3 weeks ago, and then you had me come home to 5 people in my living room and asked me to cook dinner, and you sat on this bed with me and talked about pasta, and you never said one word about it." He put both hands flat on the table. I could see him thinking, calculating. Not dishonestly, I don't think, but carefully, the way someone does when they know they've run out of angles. "I didn't think you'd say yes," he said finally, "if I'd asked." "So you decided for me." "I decided for my family." Those 4 words. I've thought about them many times since. I decided for my family. Because what they revealed, what he probably didn't even realize he'd revealed, was that in his mental map of this marriage, there were 2 categories, his family and everything else. And I, his wife, had somehow ended up on the wrong side of that line. "I am your family," I said. He looked at me, and I saw something cross his face that I hadn't expected. Not defensiveness, something closer to grief, like he was seeing for the first time exactly what he'd done, and the weight of it was hitting him all at once. "I know," he said. "Ash, I know. I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "But Marcus, I need you to understand that sorry doesn't fix what this is. You used my personal information without my consent. Do you know what a lawyer calls that?" He was quiet. "I had a consultation this morning," I said, "with a family law attorney in Midtown. I went because I needed to understand my options. Not because I've made a decision, but because you made a decision that affected my legal and financial standing, and I needed someone in my corner who could tell me where I stood." The color in his face changed. "You went to a lawyer." "I did." "Ashley," he leaned forward, I made a mistake, a bad one, I know that, but going to a lawyer is what a person does," I said, "when someone uses their social security number without permission." I kept my voice even. "I'm not filing anything. I'm not making any decisions today, but I need you to hear me when I say that what you did was not a small thing. And I need to know, right now, honestly, is there anything else? Anything else involving my name, my credit, my information that you've done without telling me?" The silence that followed lasted long enough that I felt my pulse in my fingertips. "The truck," he said. I went very still. "What about the truck?" "When I got the van serviced in January, the financing on it was coming up for renewal, and my credit score took a hit last year from the card I was paying down. I listed you as a secondary on the financing renewal, just to get the rate." January, 5 months ago. I thought about January. I thought about every conversation we'd had in January, every ordinary evening, every morning where he'd kissed me on the forehead and left for work in a van that apparently had my name attached to it. "Is there anything else?" I said. "No," he said. "That's everything." I stood up. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me again. The steadiness of it, the strange calm that comes when the thing you feared most has finally been said out loud, and it turns out you can survive the sound of it. "I'm going to need you to get Donna a hotel for tonight," I said. "I'm not asking her to leave permanently, but I need her out of this house while we figure out what we're doing. That's not negotiable." He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay." I walked to the bedroom. I heard him in the living room a few minutes later, talking to Donna in a low voice, and I heard Donna's voice rise once. "Marcus, where am I supposed to—" and then go quiet again. 40 minutes later, I heard the front door close and a car start in the driveway. I looked out the bedroom window and watched Donna's floral suitcase get loaded into Marcus's truck. He drove her to a Marriott on Cobb Parkway, 20 minutes from the house. I know because he texted me the hotel name when he got there. That was the beginning of the end, and also, though I didn't know it yet, the beginning of something else. We did couples counseling, 6 weeks of it, every Thursday evening, with a therapist named Dr. Sharon Wells, who had an office in Vinings and a no-nonsense approach I respected immediately. Marcus went because I told him it was counseling or I was calling Renee Okafor to move forward. He went, and to his credit, he didn't go performing. He went honestly. He said things in that office I hadn't heard him say in 3 years of marriage, about the weight of his family's expectations, about the way he'd grown up watching the men in his life handle things without asking permission, about the specific shame of feeling like he'd failed Deshawn and Donna by not being able to just fix it. I said things too, about the smile, the automatic self-protective smile I'd been wearing for 14 months, about eating a chicken sandwich alone in a parking garage because some part of me already knew I didn't want to come home, about what it felt like to be the person who was always expected to accommodate, always expected to expand, while the space I took up in my own house quietly shrank. Dr. Wells called it asymmetric sacrifice. One partner carrying the relational labor, the emotional management, the physical space, while the other partner's needs are treated as the default setting. She said it plainly, without dramatics, and I watched Marcus sit with it. The rental application was resolved. Marcus contacted Creekside Commons, withdrew the application, and signed a letter, drafted by Renee's office, acknowledging that the submission had been made without my consent and that I held no liability. The fraud alerts I'd placed stayed on my credit for a year as a precaution. My score, when I checked it 2 months later, was untouched. The van financing was refinanced in Marcus's name alone. That took another month and a harder conversation with his lender, but it happened. Donna found an apartment, a one-bedroom in Mableton, affordable, close enough to Marcus's family that she had a support network. She signed her own lease with her own name and paid her own deposit. Marcus helped her move. I made a casserole and dropped it off at her new place on a Sunday afternoon, just the two of us, because I didn't want the thing between us to calcify into something permanent. She hugged me at the door and said, "You're tougher than you look, honey." I told her I'd been hearing that my whole life. Marcus and I are still married. I want to be honest about that because these stories often end with someone walking out the door and starting over clean, and I understand the appeal of that ending. But the truth is messier and I think more real. We are still married, and some days it's good, genuinely good, the way it was in the first year, the way it was when he laughed at Priya's housewarming with his whole face, and I noticed before I noticed anything else. And some days, I still feel the echo of that bedroom, the ceiling fan turning slow circles, the sound of someone helping themselves to my refrigerator like it was a convenience store. What changed is the architecture. Not the people, the architecture. Marcus now tells me when family is coming, in advance, with an actual question attached. I now say no when I mean no, without a smile pasted over it. We have a guest policy, actual written terms, half a page, that we worked out in Dr. Wells's office and both signed like a small domestic contract. It sounds clinical. It is clinical. It also works. Priya came over for dinner last month, her and her fiancé Kevin, who had been Marcus's friend first and was now, in the way these things sometimes arrange themselves, part of our life together. We ate on the back patio, and Marcus grilled, and at one point, Priya caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, private nod, the kind that means, "I see you, you're okay." I nodded back. The coffee table is still sage green. I refinished it a second time last spring, not because it needed it, but because I wanted to, because it's mine. Because sometimes you take something you've already made and you make it again, better, just to prove to yourself that you still can. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. Accommodation is not love. Smiling when you mean something else is not kindness. It's a slow leak, and eventually it drains everything. The moment I stopped performing patience and started asking for what I actually needed, the marriage either had to grow into something real or it had to end. I wasn't willing to keep living in the version that required me to disappear. I ate that chicken sandwich alone in a parking garage because I was afraid to come home. I'm not afraid anymore. That's the whole story, and it's mine.